And what we're going to do is we're going to start out here with a couple of things that I found in this book. Again, this is called Training with the Master. It's a photo album of photos of O-Sensei taken by a man named Walter Kreiner. And the very last part of it is the text for the Art of Peace. So I'm kind of reading from that text, okay? Ooh. Okay, so I'm going to get into the 8 forces, but the one before that, this kind of in a series of quotes, verses. The art of peace functions everywhere on earth, in realms ranging from the vastness of space down to the tiniest plants and animals. The life force is all-pervasive and its strength boundless. The art of peace allows us to perceive and tap into that tremendous reservoir of universal energy. Okay. And we're about to go into the 8 powers, but I was looking at my news feed, depending on which news feed it does other things. And one of them was about season 3 of Stranger Things, the Netflix show. And one of the episodes was titled E Pluribus Unum, which of course is really, on money. But the translation of that was, I guess it was, the many in the one. Okay, E Pluribus Unum. And that's a lot of what O-Sensei talks about. It really talks about the one source, goes out into the many. And then there's also the many has the one source in it, has a potential to move it back to the one, okay? And so if we go over that again, the art of peace functions everywhere on earth. My sense is that, earth is of course, part of what we would perceive as the denser earthly realms of what he would call the universe. So that's most of our perception of the universe is very earthbound. Okay? In realms ranging from the vastness of space, or Star Trek, down to the tiniest plants and animals. So it's just whatever it is he calls. And again, the art of peace is a translation. Wago can be translated as, there's a harmony that extends. Wago. Wa is peace. Wada is wa. It's very important, peaceful field, okay? So my own name, all right, somewhat unintentional, all right? But we have go. So there's kind of a harmonious connection from one thing to everything and everything to that one thing. And peace oftentimes can be translated as, the last, I would say, last period of time, especially the last 4 years, have been very, very stressful. So the point is, boy, I could really use peace, okay? But it's been stressful because there's so much movement and counter movement, okay? And so, when I say I just want to go and just, I think we're allowed that, although now travel is harder, okay? All right, if I had the resources, I'd just like to go to Kauai for a couple of weeks and just sort of hang there. But, you can't really escape certain things. All right, wherever you go, I mean, there are the same issues. It's just oftentimes is that I want to get away. And Aikido is, we're allowed that. Okay, but the actual sense of it is what he considers the outer peace is everywhere. And then there are certain things you, at the present time in this earthly realm, that you can't get away from. We're talking mainly about the coronavirus, which doesn't respect anything really, okay? Even power, people, positions of power are susceptible to it, okay? So there's, wherever you go, you can't escape this. On the other hand, the art of peace, although it could be translated into something else, I think, the term O-sensei would use is Aiki. You say Aikido, it turns into what you do when you put your gi on and you bow into his picture and you train with your friends and maybe you have a good time, or you go and on a bad day you have a not so good time. Okay, practicing the movement, stretching, okay. But, that's not what O-sensei meant. That was what, obviously it's grown into, but to just put it into that. Oftentimes it's easy. We like to put things into labels, okay? And so, that some of it is protective because to really handle something in its more original meaning. Sometimes it's quite jarring. So, go over that again. The art of peace functions everywhere on earth in realms ranging from the vastness of space down to the tiniest plants and animals. The life force is all pervasive and its strength boundless. So something ties everything together. Everything together. We tend to think of inanimate, animate, matter, life. Okay? However, we're matter, we're biological matter, so we're pretty complex. But that area, it's the whole universe, even things that we don't perceive as living, have a type of aliveness. Because, since they say everything came out of what he calls ki. Okay, so he refers to this, we call life force. The universe itself is alive. And of course, we are alive also within it, and both ourselves as biological, but also everything we would say is non-living came out of that source. So that source, at some point, everything returns to it. Conversely, everything expands out from it. Okay? The art of peace allows us to perceive and tap into that tremendous reservoir of universal energy. So again, the old Star Wars, since the Force binds everything together. Okay? And then we go into what we call the 8 forces. 8 forces sustain creation: movement and stillness, solidification and fluidity, extension and contraction, unification and division. Now, a couple of those I kind of are comfortable with other English words. If I really worked pretty hard, I could probably go in and just read the Japanese. My Japanese is good enough to say, okay, this is the original Japanese. But the thing you have to realize is before it was given words, these were energies, okay? And so they're nameable in a variety of different terms. And so, for example, for me, solidification and fluidity is something a little bit more like tension, release, solidification, release. It's translated here as solidification, fluidity. Closure, opening. Okay? And then extension, contraction, expansion, contraction. Now those two are very similar. The tension, release, and the expansion, contraction, tension, release, expansion, contraction. Okay? But they're what you call the 8 powers. Okay? And so, there's a lot of Aikido, in his words. One thing I find kind of sad is that so little attention is paid both to his words and to him. It's nice we have a structure, we have a worldwide organization, that issues ranks, but very little of that is tied to him. And so for me, this period, you call it the pandemic period, I go through the same shit everybody else does. But for me, it is really a good period and a very rich period in one way, because so many things are taken away that you have an opportunity to immerse in things you otherwise would be too busy to immerse in. And one of the things is really, just going back and studying his terminology. Those sensei and I meet usually a couple times a week, okay? And we go through this stuff, okay? Now, the other one that we've put a lot of time into lately is the path of peace is exceedingly vast, reflecting the grand design of the hidden and manifest worlds. A warrior is the living shrine of the divine, one who serves that purpose. Okay? And the actual creation, again, the one goes out into the many, but also there's potential, the many going back to the one. Okay, so it goes both ways. Go whichever direction you want, or it goes out in all directions, which is a sphere, or comes back to itself as a point. There's a lot of different ways that we can start to look at that. Okay? But he references there's a design to the manifest, which is, the obvious, more earthly realms of existence. But there are finer realms. Okay, the universe is multidimensional. Even Mr. Einstein said it. The universe is multidimensional, as are we. Bingo. Okay? And so, the actual, what I kind of find to be sad is so few people, pay attention to that vastness that Aikido is. Which means, the thing that represents that more than anything else is where Shiba was sensei in his life. The words he left behind are very difficult. I'm looking at them in terms of the English translation, but those sensei and I, we kind of work a little deeper than that at the level of kind of sensing. All right, so, we're not working with the Japanese. Sometimes, I'll contact people, friends like Linda Holiday Sensei, Mary Heidi Sensei, Lauren Harris Sensei, who have the Japanese, and they've kind of studied that. And so I asked them, but what is the translation of this in Japanese? Because if I hear the Japanese, I go, oh, okay. But one of the things there, I learned to speak it somewhat to get by, but I never really studied the characters. I really never went into this is that, this, that, this, that, there. And if I sort of decided I was going to live there forever, I probably would have. But, there was a sense more my work is going to be here. So the others put substantial time in, okay? And so what the Do Sensei and I do, we kind of go more into the, using what we call our own level of direct experience on a sensing, feeling level. What was his design? And that's something we still do. I mean, I used to, ever since about 2009, we met pretty much weekly, unless I was out of the country and he was out of the country. We just met. We'd go over this stuff again. And for periods of time, I mean, that would mean I would drive and battle. I'd go to, to San Mateo where he was. And before then, yesterday I'd go all the way to San Francisco. All right. And I'd scream back and teach the Friday night class. And then after a period of that, he said, oh, let's take it a little easier. So let's meet on Thursdays, which meant my one day off. It seemed like I was going over there. And then I'd be battling the traffic back. So, it was what the Japanese consider shugyo. In other words, all knowledge, and it doesn't have to be this way, but all knowledge, sacred knowledge, oftentimes comes at a price. You don't get it just by hanging out and having fun. You usually put certain things that you cherish on the line. And that's stolen from you. In exchange, you get something back. There's always an equal exchange, although sometimes it kind of feels like, oh my God, I put all that there and all I'm getting back is this driving, spending all this time when I could be playing music or something like that. So part of that, I know Don Juan put it well. He just said that everything has to deal with death. Eventually, this universe is supposed to experience the heat death. Come back into itself, recreate itself. Okay. Now, since I was kind of into that as creation, that grand design, which we see kind of out there in the physical universe, there's an energy universe where that's happening much quicker. Like the grand design of creation and the one goes out, and the many comes back to itself. Boom, boom. The grand design here is in perfect harmony, accord with itself, goes out there. And of course, we are part of that original consciousness. We enter as consciousness, soul, and we get caught up in all this stuff out there. And so basically, this was meant to be very, very, but we kind of, okay, so here we are, this goes out, but then again, eventually it gets denser, heavier, what we call the earthly realms. And here we are, kind of in the form of a physical body as an I, all right? And so there's a possibility from where we are, I, to I self, going back to the more original of itself, to where, if you call it a true self or soul or spirit. And so, that to me is part of one of the great designs of creation. Now, what happens is that, the 8 forces can represent many things. But to a very, very contracted small I, the 8 forces are immense. So we tend to encapsulate ourselves. Some of it is safety. Okay, if you go to a rock concert, which I went to once, and somebody looked at me and said, where are your earplugs? I said, you mean you put earplugs on here? Yeah, if you don't put earplugs on, well, you're going to lose some hearing. So, my hearing's not great anyway. They gave me some earplugs, Oh. And part of that is just defense. You look at the sun directly. You can ruin your vision. So you might put lenses on. But then what happens, we forget. We have these on. And then the world around us congeals in a very, very cold potentially, matter-oriented, with very limited scales of science available to us. And we become encapsulated within a very, very limited I. And so the wonder and the beauty of creation, but those are such vast forces, there's a great amount of terror if we were to all of a sudden just go, ooh. So part of the shugyo is and so as we start to go back more towards our original I to I self, back to self, the N would be something more like an original consciousness, a soul. I suspect soul and spirit are connected, but not the same thing. Spirit is what you ride back. Okay, in other words, there is potentially a pull back towards the one. Okay? But there's also a great amount of resistance to leaving this protective shell. And so in the Don Juan books, he says that he uses the term, you balance terror and wonder. There's a wonder at the grand design of creation, and there's a potential terror factor because we're going from an encapsulation, some of it somewhat vital. If you just take it away, what? So as Deepak Chopra put it, that process must be skillfully undone. In other words, there's a pull back. But there's also, every time we try to leave that encapsulation, a push. Those forces can push. And so the misogi, which is I to self, I self to self, self to more original of itself, all the way potentially back to the one. Okay? So if we go over the 8 powers, eight forces sustain creation. I think you could probably, there are probably sub-forces and sub-sub-forces because there's many. But movement and stillness, there's motion. Well, that motion started for something and it went to something. Those movements start, but they started out of stillness. So the stillness connected to the motion. There's motion that's connected to stillness. We're so caught up in this, and that's part of the encapsulation. Some of it very, very useful, and some of it limiting. Solidification and fluidity. I see it more as tension, release. Because, those, I think I read that. And so I said, oh, it's tension release. And that's also translated in other terms. I'd like to find the original Japanese. If I'm not too lazy, I will. Okay. Extension and contraction. That's obviously like the Misogi exercise. Okay. I prefer expansion, contraction. Now, expansion, contraction, very similar to tension and release. Okay? Unification and division. The one, unity, goes out into the many. But then the many have the potential of finding their way back to the one. In Osensei's cosmology, if you will, 1, 4, 3, 8. And so the one is sometimes difficult. So we have the 4, which are attributes, qualities later on, but attributes of that one. How do you describe the one? Love. intelligence, power, beauty. On that last one, Dado Sensei likes harmony. I like beauty. Okay. And I remember one time, she died recently, Dame Diana Rigg. And I was thinking, okay, 4 energies or qualities. If I had to create her, what qualities or attributes or energies would I give her? Well, first one was love. Second one, beauty. Third one, power. Fourth, intelligence. And so later on, working a lot of this stuff, I was amazed that that was pretty good scope for the one. Wow. Okay. So in other words, the one doesn't mean much. So you said, well, ideally that one would be loving. You want beautiful, harmonious with itself, powerful, and intelligent. So 1 to 4. And then you have the 3, the triangle, circle, square in Japanese, iku musubi, taru musubi, tamatsume musubi. And there are different things, like, the triangle is represented by the plum seed, the plum. The circle is the bamboo. And the square is the pine. And this is, again, things that I got, when I was in Shingu. So Hikizuchi Sensei would oftentimes, give lectures. And initially, when I was there, it was Mary Heine Sensei translating. Okay, so the plum seed, the triangle, ikumusubi, on one level, it's just generative power, or. But there's kind of a thing, zettai fuhai na taisei, the posture of invincibility. And then the circle. And the more coinish nature of the circle has no center. But the circle is the harmonization of creation, although there's a certain sort of force necessary for creation to happen. And then the square, omote uranai, no front or back. So those are triangle, circle, square. One way of looking at it is dimension that, obvious creation, the finer dimensional layout of the universe. The original consciousness out of which those came. No front, no back, maybe no beginning, no end, something that really doesn't go linearly. That has a beginning, it is what you see in the beginning point, and that is what you experience on finer and finer form. Okay? And then the 8 powers, just my thought, the 8 powers kind of represent when you are in the process of getting from our position in the many back to the one. When we're this way, the 8 powers are vast. So they have a tendency to push So we encapsulate. We all start out that way. But as we begin that journey back from our placement in the many back to the one, which I think is what Osensei termed misogi. That's a pull. And initially, once they get out of the shell, or that shell feels protective, everything gets kind of scary. That's terror. But if I can hang in there, follow the pull, there's the wonder and the beauty of things. And so, it goes back to what Don Juan in the Castaneda book says, you balance, or you must balance terror and wonder. And most of the time we're so secure in our compartmentalization or our encasement. We feel strong, or we feel safe, or we feel limited, or we feel isolated. There's a whole series of human emotions in that state, which represent a kind of encapsulation. Okay, that's kind of why probably you find this period, or I find this period either very terrifying, because so many things that you use to cope here are sort of taken away. And so, we can either, that's a push, but as we can sort of learn to calm and settle a bit, that's the pull. And as we follow that pull, we sort of, and some of that's getting out of our comfort zone. So, that's, of course, very problematic. None of us will do this intentionally. You almost have to be, the way that Don Juan put it, is you have to be tricked, okay? To go past the norm, you have to be tricked. And Carlos, I think in a lot of ways, it's an area where Carlos wanted to find somebody so he could write his PhD dissertation and get his doctorate at UCLA in anthropology. So Don Juan started coaching him on hallucinogenic plants and everything like that. And so Carlos says, is that all trickery? And Don Juan said, yeah. I mean, it's yes and no. So, all this stuff about I was making it up, but it's that's about as good a description as you're going to get anyway. Okay, so yeah, I tricked you. And all of a sudden, he says, okay, there's another realm possible. Who am I? So I kind of got tricked. And Sensei we kind of trick people, I think, Those Sensei said that, he's been training at Hombu Dojo, and he was kind of in his physical prime, and he's training every day, and he gets his black belt. Like apparently, for Sensei, that was a big deal, and so it's Nado, so he calls Nado Sensei up, and because he's seen Sensei stuff, he interacted with him, but he had never felt it, and then Sensei kind of just absolutely I mean, if you go, occasionally you ask those things, it varies somewhat over the years, but and that was pretty major. That was, it was kind of, okay, now you're ready, right? And those Sensei describes it as kind of like, you kind of go into an energy field, and the energy field kind of rubberizes around you, then it electrifies, and you start to spin, and whoa, and then he's thrown some great distance, and And when he stands up, or since they're standing in this blind angle behind them, something like that. And he may change the language every once, but he said, I absolutely wasn't hypnotized. He didn't lead my mind. He didn't, in a Chinese sense, uproot me. It was something totally different. And so, okay, he got drawn in. And Robert Fraser said, what would happen is, he goes up to O-Sensei, and as I remember it, I hope, he says, you see O-Sensei do this stuff, and he says, I really, you use me as uke, and of course, that culture is kind of like, the second he said it, I think he said, oh my God, I overstepped my bounds. And apparently O-Sensei, you had this surge of energy, and went, uh-oh. And then O-Sensei kind of quieted down, says, after your showdown. And so what happened is, after Robert Fraser Sensei got his showdown, he started to get called up from the class when the sensei was there. And it was, kind of problematic because, it was everybody else, the teachers were strong and some had really powerful ki and everything. And with O-Sensei, he didn't know what was going on. He really didn't. In fact, he would just fall. Boom. Boom, 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 boom. And so he said, I don't know if this is real or not, but I know it must be real because I sense it's real, but I don't know that it's real, that sort of thing. And so apparently at the end of class, everybody does kokyu ho, seated. So those sensei, Fraser Sensei said that when Sensei comes over to him, right, and just holds him like this. And Robert Fraser Sensei said, I'm suspended in something, I can't move. And then he said, it's real. And there are other stories that I can't kind of remember right now, but that part of it, someone said, you gotta be tricked. It's real. I don't understand it, but it's real. So, in that sense, there are a lot of other people that probably just kept training. So anyway, what I thought we'd do is go in the other room. And I think we did a little bit of this yesterday, meaning Friday. And go into maybe what we might call the 8 powers and the 1, 4, 3, 8, as best as I can do them. Okay, currently, All of this stuff is on constant re-edit. The words change. Certain aspects of the movement changes as you go, because the whole thing about takemusu, and Hikizuchi Sensei, about the only, I would say probably the major gift he gave me was, there's one class, in fact, Robert Fraser Sensei had taken a group from UC Santa Cruz for fall of 1974. And I was there, my second visit to Japan. And Hikizuchi Sensei had stayed at my parents' house. And I pretty much had driven him everywhere for the month. I wound up on the sofa. He got the guest room. The person he brought, Mr. Sugawa, got my room. I was on the couch. And so, I was uke more and more through that. So, we started to connect on that level. First day, I was lowest of the low. I was foreigner, but I looked Japanese, so nobody paid any attention to me. But all of a sudden, you sort of come back with some status. Whoa. So, he calls me up in front of the class, and he kind of goes like that, initiates the movement, and I go like this, and he sort of gets me in this position. And then he lectures. And he's got me in this position, and I'm kind of like Robert Fraser Sensei when Sensei grabbed his wrist. It's kind of like, this is uncanny because I'm in something I can't describe, and I remember that lecture, so vividly. And one of the things, was kind of like, he said, He said martial arts, Budo, the purpose of martial arts has to be reborn, made new day by day. And then what I remember probably the most, and the whole thing was just one experience, way past the words, was he was talking about tradition. Tradition, we bow. And then he says, but the tradition in Aikido is takemusu den. And when he said that, all of a sudden, I'm in this position, and he's kind of in the knocking position, and he and I go flying. And so I realized I was part of probably a technique. A lecture may have lasted as much as 15 minutes. But there I am in that suspended state. And, it was kind of like, huh. And it was a very alive, to some degree, loving state. And then, when he would ki and come at you, right with your third eye with his fist, it was like, that was kind of scary. Okay. So, that I always considered his main gift to me was that particular statement. The tradition in Aikido is takemusu. It's a creative process. It's moment to moment. And so, the understanding, the words, they change. On the other hand, if you just stay in this encapsulated safe zone, yes, you'll learn the technique. Yes, you will acquire. If you stick around long enough. I actually got promoted in 2014 to 7th Dan. Okay. When I was a white belt, I was being prepped for Shogun, didn't wear a color belt. Ano Sensei was a 7th. Yanase Sensei was 6th. Tojima Sensei was 6th. Then over the years, I'm 7. I'm like, oh my gosh. It's not, undervaluing your own time. But there's an area where, so much of this, if you hang around long enough, you're going to get a number. Okay. And so, that part of it, it is so funny because, in this encapsulated state, that the I in that state, that's what the I wants. And we're kind of in this coronavirus pandemic period where a lot of other things are taken away from us. Just going through the dojo, we take, I take granted, but going, yeah, that's kind of, whoa. But on the other hand, there's this period where if we use it, it's very rich because it gives you a chance, or me a chance, to focus in on things other than that. Because, part of this, you can't just study your way there, but expanding your consciousness is a part of being in the many in this encapsulated state, going back to our more original self or consciousness in the one. Other than that, for some people, this is kind of a nice state. Yeah, I miss vast parts of it. But what happens is we fall asleep. Then all of a sudden, there's something called a pandemic. And the most powerful person on earth who just totally said he was going to disregard science, all of a sudden, he's got it. This is a very, very fragile state. And a lot of permanence is around the rigidity of ourselves being packed in here, mainly out of safety, because the pull back sometimes at a certain level can get very scary. So gradual. Oh, Dado Sensei's word is easy. Be easy with it. Okay, so we're going to go into the other room. And yeah, that's not set too bad. Let's move this. Hi, Pete. I'll give you a little privacy issue on back there. I have a couple of housemates, so we're kind of in the living room. This is the current dojo, so to speak. Okay. And you might as well make sure that you have a level playing field here. So that's better, right? Now I'm using, now traditionally you would use something longer or use a bokin. But again, the thing that was kind of burned into my soul during that time is the tradition, the den of Aikido is Take Musu Den. So I use this a lot. One, I can move this around. If I had something longer, I'm going to smash something. So I'll feel constricted. That's kind of the matter dimensional. And some of it is very, very, how shall I put it, there's purpose to it. So the illusion of the encapsulation is very real. And so we little at a time, following the Do Sensei's, be easy with it. Okay, it's an opening. It's kind of a settling. And one of the things that keeps us here, we get busy. I mean, going to class is kind of nice to, actually train and do the rituals and everything. But it's also the sense where you just are easy with things. All that's going on. And having a sense of what you call the grand design. Okay? And the grand design, in Guio Sensei put it, the material, earthly realms, the manifest. All right? All right. If I run, I'm going to run into that wall, bounce off it, manifest. And I'm going to feel it in my body, manifest. Right? I'm 72 years old, I feel that in my body. Okay, so, all right, there's that. But there are also the finer, what we call the hidden realms, the finer dimensions that are possible. Ooh, okay, so I'm starting out, and we've covered this one before, but it's something I do quite a bit. Right hand, left hand, kind of in the heart area. And this is a ritual, right? The one, the original unity. We come out of that one. Maybe a first identity, a soul, spirit, a true self. Okay. I go counterclockwise. That original love starts to become aware of an original design or purpose. Starts to feel itself, feel the materials of which to kind of take that journey into it. And to some degree, this becomes maybe like a more original of mind, an original of body. And then, boom, we become the child. There's a placement, I, boom, self, whatever, right about here. And the unfolding of things. Boom. And our place in that unfolding. And of course, the words change. But I kind of go through the whole thing right here. Now, that ritual is somewhat performed, my position right here in the more earthly dimensions. But as I do it several times, there's a shift in my own consciousness. Okay, so what I'm really trying to do is use that to begin the journey from my placement in the many back towards the one. On a really good day, I start from some sort of more of a placement in the one, the unity, work a balance, up, down, my own position in that balance, and establish all of that positionally in my position in the many, so that it really goes both directions. I kind of do that. Okay? We'll repeat that later with some sound, because I use the actual Su chant along with it. But where we are, for example, now, what we've been covering a little bit, figure eight. The changes, thumb down, thumb up, thumb down, thumb up, figure eight. Thumb down, thumb up, thumb down, thumb up, figure eight. Okay. On the up of the figure eight, I'm going to make the change. Thumb down from the top. On the down, I'm going to make the change. Thumb up from the bottom. All right, and if I want to continue in a direction, I just keep going top, bottom, top, bottom, top, bottom, top, bottom. Okay? If I want to, I can then stop it, but if I just keep going top, bottom, I can figure eight and go the other direction. Okay, now from here, for example, I'm primarily arms, but as we get a little more advanced, we kind of, the motion is from your core. All right, so we're kind of going. Okay, those are important ones. All right, and just a quick recap. Positions. First position, ikkyo. Second position, ikkyo is thumbs face away. Second, thumbs face each other. Third, thumbs face you. Fourth, hand positions there, but the actual sense of the body. More of a congealing sense. Not putting weight here. This does close, but. Okay, in the fifth position, thumb is here. I use this a lot because from there you can go into the figure eight movement. And a lot of times what I do here is I do the two-handed figure eight, which is different than just the figure eight or the figure eight. Okay? And so, for example, from here, you can go into the one, the two, the three, the four, the five. Okay? So if I'm going the other way, the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4, the 5. Okay? So those are just basic drills. Now, the other one that we've been working on a little bit is just here I'm doing them flat-footed, so to speak. Okay, but I'm going to walk a circle. When I walk a circle, my feet form a triangle. Okay, turn around, form a circle in the other direction. Okay, and from here, we've kind of gone through the drills. Now you're adding motion. So I'm adding these changes. I'm going right now counterclockwise, and the spin is also counterclockwise. Okay, now I can go here and reverse that. And this itself is or right here, for example, I continue that way, figure 8. Now I'm doing what I call the counterintuitive motion, which is I'm walking clockwise, the spin is counterclockwise. I go this way. This is more difficult. Okay, so those are basic changes. Now, if we go through, what did we just cover? We just stood here holding a stick. And then we can sort of get the sense that this represents kind of a primal unity or a 1. But then we learned this, we learned the figure 8. Actually, in terms of this, you learn the figure 8 first, all right? Then you would learn this, okay? Okay, and we learned that this has a thumb down, thumb up, thumb down, thumb up. With figure 8, you can make a change either from the bottom or the top. Keep it going. If you keep it going in a direction, right? And what we can do, for example, is move. I call this intuitive. We're going clockwise, then we're going counter, and then we're going clockwise with the spin and then yes, but we can reverse. Now this is intuitive in the other direction. But going here, keeping that direction, I get to where I can do a little bit of what we call the counterintuitive, okay? And then by doing that, I'm reversing both the spin in my direction. Boom, boom. Okay, so you see the 1 unification divided into many things. So that's an aspect of the 8 powers. So the many go back to the 1. But just the act of doing this, it's kind of more called contraction, expansion. It's actually, I slow it down and try to explain it. It gets hard, especially with a smaller weapon. Boom, boom. In other words, boom, comes back in, goes back out. Comes back in, goes back out. Contraction, expansion. Part of that, there's both a tension and a release. Boom. Tension and a release. The tension and the release. Boom. Tension, release. Okay? And stillness, motion, stillness, motion. But there are pockets of stillness when you see this is the track here. Boom, but boom, boom. After a while, that and that, you don't set. The stillness is not a set change direction, it's just boom, 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 boom. So you have the unification division, the many, the one going into the many, boom, 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 boom. So that becomes a way of, if you develop it, you're kind of going into okay? So that's a lot. Now, initially, as you get a little bit more. Boom, 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 boom. Movements sort of naturally sort of happen. And the tradition of Aikido is takemusu. Takemusu. Boom, 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 boom. Now, once you know the changes, you can do something like go this way, go that 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 way. Okay, and just really what I did is improvise to the 8 directions. Okay, using kind of the, the changes and, the 8 powers, 8 directions, 8 powers. Boom, 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 boom. And then you can just pick various directions. Whoa, whoa. After a while, the progressions are, in theory, infinite. It's not so much that you can't categorize them, say, no, you only did 32 or 85 or whatever it is. You can keep statistics, but infinity is a thing where, okay, kind of move. I'll move this way, boom, 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 boom. Stillness, motion, boom. Now there's motion or expansion, but there's kind of a coming together, a contraction, focusing, boom, that creates that motion. So the 8 powers. Boom. And if you kind of check back here, there's a calmness here. There's an openness here. It's kind of a nice alive ground, which is not a set position. And there's power here, boom. But it's not anything you hold on to, and you don't define it as power over. In fact, it can be very, very power, uke, and it's supposed to be shared. Uke, nage, nage, uke. There's really no win other than we win over the sense where I want to hold on to the power, or I am at the mercy of the power. Okay? And there's a beauty, hopefully. Boom, boom, different movements. It's just power, but a beauty. And, just the ability to focus and, do that. There's an intelligence that is creating or supporting this free flow. Okay? So we go back to the 4 attributes, the power, the beauty, Love, in other words, why would you do this? At some point you enjoy, you love the freedom, the creativity of it. Boom, boom. Boom, 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 boom. Boom, 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 boom. Boom, 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 boom. Boom, boom, boom. And so I come out of a session like this feeling kind of cleansed. In other words, my encapsulated limited eye is starting to go back towards a more original of itself. The movements, the intelligence integrates things. If you need to, boom, boom, there's a power here to the movements that doesn't have to depend on beating anybody out there. And I love the creativity. Boom, boom. So all of that, I just have a space here and I have a tiny little stick. So kind of going the one. It looks like we're going 1 to 2, but mind going out kind of rebounds back. It's not just the actual awareness, but starts to feel itself. Man. Body, boom, going and filling in all that. Boom. Starts to be more conscious, feel itself. And then boom, we become boom, the child of those, the unity of those. Boom. And establishing the position. You're establishing, we're going from the original one, establishing our position as that one here in the many. Likewise, you're in the many, just growing away in that many. You're getting some balance up, down in that many. You're consolidating that balance. You're positioning yourself to follow that pull back to the one. Boom, 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 one. And then the progression of things starts to be almost infinite. Okay? And again, Hikizuchi Sensei's great gift to me. The tradition of Aikido is the Take Musu. So, I do my own sort of tradition. So I don't tend to do a lot of the obvious ritual Musogi, but I do, that great gift that I got. And I'm sure at some point in Hikizuchi Sensei's training, where Sensei did something somewhat similar to him, he's just boom, and it was a direct experience, Takemusu. Okay? So, check in here. Anybody with a question or, again, when you start to kind of cook on that one, watch out if you're inside, because you can smash something pretty easy. That's why one reason why I use the shorter ones, okay? Anybody with a question? That's a lot to cover. Yeah, Cliff, you got something? Okay, all right, you don't have to. Okay. Anybody else? Just wave your hand or speak up. Okay. Yeah, just something that we've covered a bit. I was never really taught these changes. There's certain changes that I learned from Hikizuchi Sensei. Okay, you know. But basically what I did, he would go 1, 1, 2, and I just went 1, 2, 3, 4. I began to kind of the obvious 1, 2, but 1, 2, 3, 4. So my movements, I don't know whether he did the 1, 2, 3, 4 movements, or if he did, but practiced them in secret, which is also, you know, more traditional, right? It always amazed me that you know, since they would do this beautiful staff work, and all of his students, you know, they're like that, or he just since they had, you know, a more fluid, basic form he taught, and then he would start to give you some tools for this, but it really wasn't, you know, it wasn't fleshed out. So how do you? Where does all this stuff come from? And so a game we were playing was, you know, just for a second or two, what we're going to do is the game is you get your news feed from the universe. And I don't mean we're thinking about what the president is going through in the hospital right now. It's just the news feed from the universe comes through things like calm, still. So being very easy where you are. One of the things that keeps us caught in this more encapsulated form as I in the earthly dimensions is just what Bruce Lee called the noisy mind. They're just sitting, and the news feed from the universe comes through quiet, comes through calm, comes through stillness. And as things pick up the pace out there, we get more involved or pulled into them. But they also wind us tighter in this encapsulation state. So just sitting, getting your news feed from the universe. Well, since he talks about the six senses, one of which he listed is mind. As my mind calms down, my other senses get clearer. So there's more of a sense of where I am, and even on this level, who I am. I find my breathing starts to kind of get more rhythmic and it deepens. The sense of ground starts to become not just a thought, but well, part of my consciousness. And it's right about here the world of imagination opens up. And they can't really open up when I'm too caught up in the noisy dialogue of the world, or my own personal noisy dialogue. So we started out just tuning into the news feed from the universe. So a lot of the changes, like this, are just stuff I kind of got just by quieting, opening, and in a positive way that's very respectful, messing around. If you don't mess around positively and respectfully, you stay in this containment. And most people find it quite safe there. But during periods like this with the coronavirus and racial tensions and economic uncertainty, and our cage is being rattled. Okay, so that's the push of the forces. But we also have the potential. Now, since they call them isogi, one of the things is to clear the mind or get out of or be easy with the noisy mind place. Then imagination is where the knowledge comes from. All new knowledge comes through imagination. Another favorite Einstein quote of mine, imagination is more important than knowledge. And right behind that is, all I want to do is to know God's thoughts. Everything else, details. And there's a structure and intelligence to the universe. And so as we start to calm down, deepen, clear the kind of the pollution here, the I mind, we realize we all come out of those thoughts. The universe has an intelligence. As we listen to its news feed, we're kind of rewarded with what Einstein considered imagination. That's where everything new comes from. That's where a new level of us comes from. Okay? So that, if you kind of want to play around with it, most of you probably are anyway. But if you don't do that, the newsfeed of the world just adds more contamination to your senses. And it's real difficult to kind of get to where you or I can continue to function because it's just so nutty. Okay? But as we get into that place, then it's not just imagination in a mental way. The movements themselves. You're in the imagine feel area where your mind and your body start to work as a unit. Okay? Now let's see. We have a couple of minutes. Anybody with a question? That's just basic sitting. Most of you probably do some of it anyway. Just sit down and quiet down. You're doing some of that. But I like to play the game. I'm getting my news feed from the universe. Kind of ups my game a little bit. Okay? Anybody? Question, comment? Cliff?
Just that I do value taking the time in class periodically to do this, because when you live with small children, it's hard to carve out that space on your own for with no excuse.
I know it. Isn't that something?
Thank you for the excuse.
Yeah. I remember I took my first art was Shotokan karate, and because it was ritual, the guy that taught me he was a Shodan, real tough. All right, I got beaten up all the time because it looked like I was the most serious student in the class. But we would meditate, mokuso, which means you sit seja and sit. It was a ritual, right? And then, I kind of enjoyed it. you know, but it was just, this is something we gotta do, mokuso, boom, okay. And you know, in the Aikido classes, Robert Fraser just have us sit. And I thought, wow, this is really cool that there's an art that in some sense encourages that. Now you can kind of make the Aikido kind of into a form of Shotokan. It's just that you get a little too traditional, you get a little too obsessed with this is how it's done, and boom, you meditate before every class, boom, 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 boom. It's not, no, you sit because you sit. When you sit, it's very personal. And if you tell people what to do, I mean, I just use the term, I get my news feed from the universe that way. It gets me out of the noisy mind. Gets me out of, you know, this contamination of the news feed of the world, which keeps me in that containment space, which is good. But, you know, ultimately, when that news feed gets a little too radical, a little too like that, then all of a sudden, you know, you find your well-being threatened by it. Your physical and emotional, and even spiritual health can really, really, to use an expression, go to hell. So just the ability to, it's important. Anybody else on that? Yeah, I mean, I try to do that. Yeah, David?
The thing I'm running into is just sitting still in one position, no matter what position it is, starts to hurt very quickly. Some part of my body starts to hurt.
Yeah, you know, the thing is, there's no particular way of doing it. I know that, you know, I can't remember the guy's name, but he did a lot of work with people that were terminal, okay? And, you know, he's talking about meditation. And I have his book somewhere, but, you know, they're in storage and I haven't looked at them in decades. And he just said at one point, you know, he was really into meditation. And then, you know, he couldn't meditate because his back hurt.
Yes.
When he sat. So what happens? He started meditating, lying down, and that started to hurt. And then he found that if he laid on his side, he could meditate. See, a lot of times, you know, there's a sense where if you get a little too, well, you got to do this, and you know, your body's body, it's a form that's not going to work for you. You see, like I have a chair I bought years ago, which is kind of one of those things where you can lie in and it's sloped, and so it's supposed to really. A lot of times, I'll just lie in that and just sort of do this there. You know, find some place where it's not an issue. You can do it lying on your back. You can do it lying on your side. You can do it lying on your belly. Okay? But the major thing is you quiet your easy. Newsfeed from the universe. That's what I use. Somebody says, that's being kind of disrespectful. You should have this for this. I've done so many different meditation styles. And, you know, this is my own personal style. Best thing is for you to find what works for you. It's basic Bruce Lee. You know, it's the intercepting fist, not some flowery pattern because, you know, this was taught in this tradition or that tradition, right? If it works for you, find it. Lie on your back, lie on your tummy. Find some position where you don't have to deal with that pain. Because that gives you a good excuse, like it gives a good excuse for me to go, you know, I'd like to meditate, but I get so caught up in being mad at our president that I start to like being mad at him, and I go, and then I was sick, and I'm going, who am I? You know, who am I? Am I that hatred and judgment, or am I easy with it? Let the universe deal with them. Okay, so I mean, that's a tricky one because I still go into pretty easily. Okay, anybody else with a question or observation on that? Yeah, if you're in some sense of physical pain, you know, unfortunately, a lot of my stuff is, you know, I mean, what I ran into more than anything else when I was in Japan, it was just ordeal. And so every time I went back, it was the ordeals were worse for a while. So, at some point you go, okay. So I didn't go back for a long time. And, when I go back, I kind of tend to, I don't plan to go back. All right. But, should it ever happen, just say, okay, you got to watch out for yourself. Last summer I was there, I took my horn with me, which means I could, I could play, and, that's kind of maybe disrespectful. I'll go, bah, 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 get out of that ordeal, right? Do something for yourself, So that part of it is very tricky because, there's a certain area, I think it was Gurdjieff. He said there are 3 basic paths. What was it? Or maybe 4. He said the first one was the way of the fakir. Yeah. And what the fakir does is the fakir, for example, with all that pain, just hangs in there. And eventually, the way Gurdjieff put it, his body produces the chemical, which then changes his consciousness. So the way of the fakir is absolutely the least efficient. And then he said the next one up was what he called the way of the monk, which is, dealing with your emotions. And the monk's life is very, very regimented and bum, 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 bum. And, you could just be the most severe, austere, Dada monk. But he says the whole purpose of it is that your body at some point creates a chemical, which creates a change in consciousness. And so he said that's better than the fakir. It's one up. Then he said the third level was the way of the yogi. Yoga. And so, yoga, and the way he put it was the yogi or yoga teaches you to deal with energy. So he said that was, going up one fakir, can work, least efficient, monk, little better, the yogi, getting up there. Okay, now he said there's a 4th way. And the 4th way is the way he put it, not everybody knows about. And he says, I call it the way of the sly person. And the 4th way is you do some of the discipline physically of the fakir. You also simultaneously work on the emotional body, just like the monk. You also work on consciousness and energy, like the yogi does. You work on all 3. Ideally, Aikido is supposed to be that. It's the way of the sly person, because there's a body. You are working. Your emotions, which are levels of energy. Trying to get a little bit more balance, personally, all right, situationally. And then your consciousness is other realms of body, or other realms of feeling than just the range of emotions we allow ourselves. And so as you grow in the 3, there's a 4th way. Okay? Always remember that one. So, you're going to have most of, for example, for me in Japan, was 1 and 2. In other words, you go there and you really physically face ordeal after ordeal, which just also goes into the emotional and just rips you to pieces. You are like in this real crucible. Okay? And paradoxically, other than a couple of the experiences I talked about with Hikitsuchi Sensei, a lot of the work I did kind of in terms of energy is actually more here in this particular, American setting. In fact, let's do this. We can talk a little bit more. I'm going to go through that original first Misogi exercise, and we'll do that with some sound. Okay? And then we'll go in the other room. Okay? Okay. So we kind of go through. So I'm holding this in my right hand. And this ritual goes both ways. On a good day, you're closer to the one. And that one starts to reach out into the many. And, most days you're going to start out in the many, going back to the one. Works either way. Okay? Movement one. But we'll original, unity, whatever you want to call it. We come out of that, the original level, our own original consciousness. I am consciousness within it. Soul, original, a personalization beginning pretty early of that soul. This is a counterclockwise upward motion. That original had a mind, a design. And that design was not purely just mental, it was kind of full, also felt itself now. And ingredients, matter, finer energies to matter, all the way down to the quantum level. There was a body. And those two forces, mind and body, produce me. Boom. As a child of those forces, forms. And that child positions himself as a child of that one, okay, in the many. Conversely, if you are starting from the many, scoring away in your balance, all the way to the one and consolidating your position in the one. So I do that. Now I also use sound. So for me, that original, the sound of that original consciousness is Su, S-U. Conversely, I'm right here in the many, trying to follow the pull back to the one. Vibrationally, Su. Yeah? Ooh. A personalization starts very early out of that one. Mind, intelligence. Body, substance. Create myself as the child. Boom. And that child is positioned either in the many as the one, or going all the way back from the many into the one is a consolidation. Goes either way. All right? And I use sound. Original, Su. Ooh, the personalization. Ah. oo, e, e. So I use this a lot. If I were smart, I'd do it every morning when I wake up, just before the contamination, the pollution of the world's news feed hits my senses. But I'm lazy. Okay? And to actually do it, that's more like benkyo, it's study. That's library. Okay, you're in the library. This is kind of like the laboratory where you're kind of, okay, lining up. Su, ah, oh, ooh. Now, Sensei didn't just go he went re. And he just go he went gi. Okay, and again, that goes from the one out to the many, or in your particular case, or my particular case, I'm in the many, I want to go back to the one, or make an approach on it. Okay, and that is more like the laboratory where you're exploring your study. Okay, now, the Do-sensei tends to call what we're going to do the gym. I say it's the playing field of the playing court, creation. Or conversely, creation about to happen. Boom. And be, all right. So I'm going to do that a couple of times. You can chant with me or not, okay? Su. Go again. Su. Let me check the sound. I think we have right here.
I have a basic question.
Original sound. Let me just do that. Okay. Yes. Cliff?
Yeah, sorry. It's kind of a dumb question. So when you're holding the staff and you're lifting it up and spinning it, if I'm looking up at the tip when it's going up, am I going clockwise or counterclockwise?
You're going counterclockwise.
Okay, and then if I'm looking up at it on the way down, it's clockwise.
This is clockwise. Up, the way O-sensei puts it, up, rightward, down, leftward. Okay?
Okay, so that sounds like it's actually clockwise going up if I'm looking from below. Like maybe a Japanese clock is backwards.
Yeah, I don't reference looking from above. I reference from where I am. If
Right.
I'm going this way, it's a counterclockwise motion. Okay? If I'm going this way, looking this way, it's a clockwise motion.
That's counterclockwise.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean that's
okay.
The study of it. If you watch him, he goes. If you go right, I go rightward. Now I go right. It's hard for me to start it. I go counterclockwise. Go clockwise if I start rightward. Okay. For example, I'm going to create a line. Now I'm going to create a cone and go rightward. Okay, so for me, that is a counterclockwise rotation. Now, conversely, I'm going leftward and I'm going to create a cone. It's clockwise. That's the way I look at it. That's probably
Thank you.
What that is. That's the library. That's the library. Then we have the laboratory, which is basically where you mess around. Laboratory has beginnings of a little bit of body feel to it. But when you hit, what Nado Sensei calls the gym, and I prefer like a playing field, playing court, or the dojo. In other words, you're not just researching a movement, you're actually in the training feel of it. That's the dojo. Okay? So that part of it is important. So is that a little clearer? I mean, I watch O Sensei when he kind of does that. If you watch him on the films, he says right word up, left word down. And so that's the way I see it, okay? Because I'm forming a line to my right, but then I'm forming a cone going rightward. And conversely, I'm going to my left, I form a cone going to the left. Okay? But good question. See,
Thank you.
The best questions are dumb because other than that, you're going, I don't know. I'm too afraid to ask a question, right? So what does that mean? The universe is trying to tell me something, and I'm too stupid to listen. So when you have a dumb question, that's the best time to say, I got a dumb question. Okay? Anybody else with a question, intelligent or dumb, or a statement? Okay? Now, there's a couple of other things here before we go into the other room. Now, when you're wondering whether it's this or that, you're in what's called the library. Very vital. If you don't get the information right. I'm an alchemist, and I'm looking for the tome. In the Doctor Strange movie, he learns how to create a circle and teleport and take things. And so he's not supposed to be in this library. But he's able to go this way, reach in and get the book without the guardian of the library knowing. And so he's reading all this stuff. He says, I'm fluent in Google speak. Okay, so he's getting all that, right? He has a photographic memory. So that's the library. Well, first motion, O Sensei says, is up to the right. So for me, it's counterclockwise. Then the down is leftward. So when I form a cone, right? And then, there's a sense where, and this is mainly from messing around, which is then the laboratory. So I'm going to go, there's Su, but then again, within that original consciousness, for whatever reason, we all personalized. U, Su, U. And the Do Sensei and I fight each other on this all the time. He says, Jack, there's no Su. There's no U, just Su. But for me, there's Su, U. Okay? Then there's Ah. Then there's O. And then Womb. And then the Ah and the O. Ah represent the original mind of creation. O, the original substance of creation. Energy, which goes all the way into matter, different dimensions. And then U, we come into, from the original possession, Su to U, personalization as soul. That original unity goes into an original mind, an original design, body, and boom, there's birth. And then there's positioning in the many as the one. O Sensei's Ame no Ukihashi, my thought. Or conversely, we're starting from we're in the many, realizing there's an encapsulation, but there's also a pull back. So, I start out with the Su because I'm buying a ticket. You used to go to Japan, you say, Doko ikimasu ka? Where are you going? You say, Shingu-shi, Wakayama-ken. Shingu City in Wakayama Prefecture. And then you pay and you get on the train and you go there. So it's like you're here, but you're kind of at the train station saying, my destination is the one, Su. And then you buy the ticket. Boom. And you make sure you get the prefecture right because there's more than one Shingu city. All right. And you find a place to sit on that train and you travel. And boom, you have a purpose to your, which was my day. I had to go there and undergo all that stuff to train. And when I got there, there was a city. You had to know how to navigate that city, and there was the dojo. And right there was me. The dojo was the center there. But I liked this shrine, that shrine. I knew where to go and buy this sushi or eat that donburi dish. You see what I mean? So that gets to be that way. That is the laboratory. Now, the playing field. And so for me, you have to find your own truth with it. And you can, I just sort of described, Hikizuchi Sensei's great gift to me, that one class. But, what I did with it is maybe a little different than what other people have done with it. So, I like ritual, but the ritual that I do, oftentimes a lot of people find a little too, whatever. There's safety in aho, in certain types of ritual. And I'm kind of, I'm a little bit outside of that box. In the old BBC original series of Doctor Who, he's one of the Time Lords. But, depending on the story, he was so weird they kicked him out, or he was so stifled by that culture that he stole a space-time machine that was locked into the form of a London police box to travel and have his own experiences in space-time instead of being just a Time Lord stuck in this place called Gallifrey, kind of just being a Time Lord. So anyway, that's one of my major archetypes is Doctor Who. Let's see. So we're back in here. Anybody with a question or observation? The kind of just getting your news feed from the universe in whatever way. If you got to lie down to get it, that's fine. Sometimes if you get too form oriented, you just bounce off the walls. It becomes a great way to just stay in the containment field of the eye. So you gotta mess around. You gotta be very easy with this stuff. Don Juan told Carlos is on this path of knowledge, nothing is ever as clear as you would like it. So you have to be very good at improvisation. So if you can't sit to listen to it, lie down in whatever posture or find a chair where you don't get a backache sitting. You got to be very fluid. Because other than that, you get stuck in the way of the fakir, and that might not be your thing. Okay. All right. So anyway, anybody with a question or comment? So we covered a lot of stuff, I hope. We were hoping to be outside today, but the air quality, I'm looking out there and all I kind of see, I see the sun, but I kind of see a kind of smoke in the air. So I don't think it would have been a good idea to have been outside for 90 minutes and that. So anybody with a question or comment? Anybody? Don't need to, but Cliff? Anything? No? Okay. Let's go over.
Just that I agree with you about the air quality. I'm glad we did the class.
Yeah, yeah, it's just crazy. The whole thing is no, you got to go out there and part of tradition. You put your gi on, you go out there, and you suffer in that bad air. And I'm like, why? All right. I remember Hikizuchi Sensei. It was past where I actually would hang out with him, but he's in a class teaching a really large group of students in France, and he lectures and lectures and lectures, right? And they're all sitting seiza, and I think one thing he says, "Your legs hurt." He says, "Good." He keeps talking. So unless you get the pain, you'll never really learn. It'll just stay surface. So good, you guys hurt. That's the traditional way, right? And to some degree, there's a certain sense if you do that, you kind of spiritually can toughen up. You know what I mean? And sometimes, when the coronavirus takes this away and that away and that away, and the government takes this away and that away, you got to be kind of tough to survive. But if all you are is tough, you might be tough but stupid. Tough without intelligence doesn't get you anything. I mean, our president was very tough. He didn't wear a mask. He didn't socially distance. That's tough. Okay, he's in the hospital. You don't defy the universe or science and get away with it. Eventually, it will rebound. So you can't, certain things about the traditional Buddha way, the pain, the hardship and everything, they're valuable to a certain degree. But if you're tough and you're stupid, it doesn't go anywhere. Anybody else with a question or comment on this stuff? And some things, just go over, and this is again, you're talking to somebody who, since 2009, basically, with few exceptions, I was driving all the way up to San Francisco initially to do this study stuff with Nadeau Sensei. For a while, Robert Noah, it was just the three of us. And then I'm in Hawaii in 2012, and I always have this ability, which is sometimes I just get in over my head. So you're in over your head when you just think you're going to go nuts. Okay, so I just created where I went to Kauai for a week or something. I lied. I was teaching at San Jose State. I said it was a conference I've been invited to, so I gave them alternative assignments for a week and split for Kauai. And I'm there kind of unwinding there, and I get this call from Robert Noah, and he says, "Jack, I just want to let you know I quit." And Noah Sensei, Robert Noah was a black belt when I first started. He was a teenager, and he'd been doing this stuff for some god awful amount of time. And he sort of since kind of reconnected, but it was just like, this is just getting too weird. So there I am in paradise trying to unwind, and then I spend about an hour and a half on my cell phone kind of with him, and it's okay. But, sometimes when you need to duck or you need to just unwind or dissociate, that's what you do, you know, because, if you warp yourself, like you're so steely as the fakir that you don't produce that chemical, you're just almost inorganic. And if you're the monk and think the whole thing is about piling on hardship after hardship and suffering after suffering, you're going to just create a prison for yourself. And if you're the yogi and because there was a question last night, and I don't think that Nadeau Sensei understood it totally, but somebody asked him about the causal Wada. And in the autobiography of a yogi, Sri Yukteswar, Yogananda's guru, he crosses over, then he comes back. Okay, and he starts talking to Yogananda about his, his experiences in the other realm, in the finer dimensions. And Yogananda is saying, it's so hard, Guruji, here I am in this material dimension trying to enlighten people and get them to see the truth of who they are and to hang out with God. And boy, this is hard. And his guru says, you think you have it tough. I was put in charge of this very advanced dimension where everybody is basically godlike. And you think you have problems. Because he said there's a difference between being godlike and being the source, or in the source, of the source. And so he said, you think it's hard dealing with people. You try to deal with almost gods and goddesses. And he said, that's tougher. And so when, I can't remember her name, Amy from Florida, okay, asked Nado Sensei about the, not just the astral planes, but the causal plane. I said, that's pretty much where I would have put those beings. And so Yogananda's teacher, he was commissioned to deal with beings that were either there or almost there. And so his contention was, we have these almost gods, godlike beings and consciousnesses that just are stuck being almost godlike. And you think you have it tough. And so, there's an area where here we are being rained on by so many things like the pandemic and, everything. We have it tough. But thinking you would have, like beings on the other side that are so advanced that they're stuck. And then, realizing yourself, positioning yourself as, because there was the original, the one, but we individuated at that point, became a soul within that original soul. And then, as creation unfolded, we went out into the many, and the many started to get very dense, and we started to kind of go like this in here, and we're caught here in this encapsulation, this containment field called the I. There's this noisy mind, this collective news feed that's keeping us here. And the forces out there, when they're in this state, push as you try to go back. So it's very important to ease your way back, because there's also a pull back to our more original. That's basic Osensei. When you look at his 1438, 1438, that's what I see. Okay, and I've gotten a lot of this, just sort of, one way or another, listening to the universal news feed, hanging out at whatever level of universal library, hanging out at whatever level of universal laboratory, and spending some time in the universal gym, playing field, dojo. As you get older, it's pretty hard to do the latter, but what I find is I will do shorter periods of more intense movement. Other than that, just wind up hanging out in the library and the laboratory, which is good, but there is that primal push to actualize yourself, both at the level of the one, boom, you individuate there. Conversely, you go out into the many and boom, you still have that connection in yourself to the one. And that playing field, now Do-sensei loves the gym. You know, I don't know whether he would have been, I think he was pretty athletic when he was younger, but, you know, he would have been more tennis or, you know, golf or something like that. But, you know, for me, you know, I used to do a lot of work. For me, it would be the playing, the court, you know, because, you know, I would go out there and I'd play pickup, basically. I played some organized, but it was a chance to feel yourself on the playing field or playing court and see, you know, what this work was: library, laboratory, boom. Okay, so, you know, those are three distinct ones. The astral planes are more like the laboratory, with an emphasis on library. And one thing we have in the earthly dimensions, we have the actual playing field, or the playing, the court, the arena, the whatever it is. And so that's something that we can, well, Sensei did something pretty amazing. Okay? So anybody with a question or a, okay? One thing that I was kind of noticing is a lot of times if you read about O-sensei, you know, you get kind of a very, very upper sense of who he was. And so if you, my understanding, as much as the energies around him were very fine, there was a real primal sense to him. So, for example, if I kind of do the chanting, you know, let's take off. Su. 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 I'm trying to also connect to that primalness, if that's the word. Primality, primalness, I would say probably primalness. I'll have to check that one. That there's an immediacy to him. He wasn't just somebody, you know, a guru in a fancy astral dimension here. He was somebody who was touching kind of the actual burn, the actual guts of creation. So boom, in some of these movements, you see the actual sense of the original one and its original four attributes. You know, the beauty, the power, the intelligence, the love. Those are descriptions of that one, because it's one. What is it? Well, okay. Aramitama, Kushimitama, Migimitama, Sachimitama. Those are the Shikon, the four attributes. And they go into, again, the three fundamentals or origins: Iku Musubi, Taru Musubi, Tama Musubi. Then they go into the 8 powers. So that part of it is, you know, that's about the best I can do. So anyway, for me, a good session. I hope, you know, it was a lot of individual, kind of more of a lecture format. But when you're training, don't neglect the last one, you know, which is the playing field. So Cliff was saying that he's been kind of alternating some of his karate, right? You know, because I do movements kind of in a more research laboratory, but boom, you know. You also alternate that with, you know, I don't go for as long as I used to. You're 72 years old. If you do too much of it, you wear yourself out. But to hang out more in the primalness, the actual playing fieldness of it, is also crucial. Hikitsuchi Sensei said something interesting to me once. And he said that, people think, because when O-sensei was in Shingu, he would stay with Hikitsuchi Sensei. And, they would train together. And there are a couple of stories around that. But he says, people think, okay, that, we spent hours I would spend hours with him getting instruction. He said, no, it wasn't that at all. It was mainly I hung out with him, watched television, watched him eat, go out on food, prepared his bath for him. He says, every once in a while I go, Bob, and then 30 seconds max, Jack. That was, he didn't go in there and go, he just, all of a sudden, okay. That was O-sensei's style. It was all of a sudden, the energy was there. It was a training. And you were uke. O-sensei wasn't going to uke for you. And then for 15, 10, 30 seconds max, you were in it. And then the rest of the time, he says that it was just being in that vibe with him. Being in that vibe with him. And then being ready in case all of a sudden the teaching came. He said that was what it was like. And so sometimes, he would pull me from class, when there was a hot class going on. I was like, oh, I get to train, all that. Anyway, come hang out with me, inhale my cigarette smoke for no particular reason, And the tricky thing is, you think that's Aikido. But, you're sitting where I sat. And I'm sitting where O-sensei sat. Now, I'm not O-sensei, but this is where it's passed on. That's the way it was kind of put to me. That's why, for me, a lot of it is Aikido, when it's a little too social and a little too tame. So, Cliff kind of doing his karate. What I do, I do it every day because, it has more jumping up and down, but I do the Tai Chi weapons, the saber and the sword, because, it was an area where, or I'll take this and I'll go really just go at it for a couple of minutes. Or I'll take the sword and boom, and the thing I researched, you move like a beam of light, fly like lightning, or boom, you strike like thunder, or you move in circles around the stable center. And I, using athletes, he says I cross-train. I move like a beam of light. You're going to go like that, moving, but boom, you move like a beam of light. You fly like lightning, you strike like thunder. I cross-train, and then, you start to move in circles around. So I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And when I do it, I'm in the gym, I'm in the playing field, I'm in the dojo. And I do it for periods, and I alternate. I don't do one thing forever, because that wears you out. So that's a challenge. If somebody says, oh, why don't you get up and do 1,000 sword cuts? Well, one, I'd be bored out of my mind. But I can swing the sword and line up to, I'm gonna move like a beam of light. Move like a beam of light. I'm gonna fly like lightning. I'm gonna fly like lightning. I'm gonna strike like thunder. I can strike like thunder. And I'm gonna move in circles around the stable center. Boom, boom. I can do that. And so that's what I tend to do. And what's interesting is, during a non-pandemic period, I'm busy teaching classes and everything, which is good. I miss that. But I also find that this sort of training gets you past a lot of the stumbling blocks. Like, there's no pandemic. What would we be doing? Waiting for the election and praying. And probably too busy to really get in touch with ourselves. Okay? And some of that's good because, but again, it's an encapsulation. And so periods like this, where things are totally awful, on some level, you kind of look at yourself at a much, from a much more introspective depth, right? I got my days when I just don't want to do anything. I'm just shot. But when I pick the sword up, or when I pick this up, or I pick my horn up, because I do music too, then all of a sudden, things start to line up. The process of going from wherever I am in the many back more towards the one. Or conversely, on a good day, I'm more in the one and aligning myself in the many. That is, really what I find. And the expression, which I'll go into probably next week, Osensa says, use the one to strike the many. Well, strike the many doesn't mean you destroy. Like in music, you're going to strike a chord. As you get into that one, everything else in the universe is a sub-vibration interval of that one. If you can begin to strike the chord of the one, you start to be able to strike the chord, almost any corresponding chord. That's, to me, what Osensu meant by kotokama. Okay? And, and what Cliff said about the karate, I think, don't sign up for a karate course just to do that. But you can pick up the bokken and you can practice, and you may not understand it, but that's the best place. Move like a beam of light. Move like a beam of light. Fly like lightning. Strike like thunder. Move in circles around a stable center. And that's you. When you do that, you put yourself kind of in Odedo Sensei's gym. Or to some degree, when I'm there, I'm on the court with the basketball gods. Something like that. And you don't stay there for a long time. But you understand that everything you do in terms of the actual library, getting the news feed, get to the library. Then you get to go to the laboratory, which means you get to mess around. And then there's the exactitude of the playing field. And right now we have to set that up for ourselves because so much has been taken away by circumstance and the pandemic and the stupidity of the politicians. So anyway, I think that's going to be it for me today. Anybody with a closing comment or statement or question? Okay, thank you.